I'm Ashley, a 28-year-old graphic designer living my dream life in the big city. My days are filled with creativity, designing cool stuff, and enjoying the hustle and bustle of urban life. But every few weeks, I pack my bags and make the trip back to my small hometown to spend some quality time with my family. My family is the best, or at least most of them are. There's mom and dad, who always seem to have the perfect advice for everything. My big brother, James, who's a bit overprotective but always has my back. Then there's my little sister, Lauren, a bubbly 17-year-old who looks up to me and always wants to hear my stories about city life. And, of course, there's Aunt Cheryl. Now, Aunt Cheryl is a whole story on her own. Ashley, honey, your aunt's just particular, Mom would say whenever I mentioned Cheryl's behavior. Mom always tried to make it seem like Aunt Cheryl was just a little quirky. But deep down, I knew the truth. Aunt Cheryl didn't like me. I don't know why, but it was clear she'd had it out for me from the day I was born. The backhanded compliments and judgmental looks were her specialty. Like the time I landed my dream job at a cutting-edge design startup. I was so excited, practically bursting to tell everyone at dinner. But her response? "Oh, how nice for you, Ashley. It's good to know they're giving opportunities to all kinds of people these days." The words were polite, but the tone was dripping with sarcasm. Classic Aunt Cheryl. Still, I tried not to let it get to me. Family is family, right? You take the good with the bad. Things took an interesting turn a few months ago when my parents decided to get a dog. I was thrilled. I've always loved animals, and I'd been dreaming of them getting a pet for years. They brought home a gorgeous pit bull puppy named Jack. Dad couldn't stop talking about how smart and energetic Jack was, and I fell in love the moment I saw him. But things didn't go the way I imagined. From the very first time Jack met me, something felt off. At first, he seemed wary, standing back and watching me with cautious eyes. Then it got worse. Every time I visited, he would growl or snap at me. I tried to brush it off, thinking it was just a phase or some kind of puppy behavior. Maybe he's just protective of his new home, I told myself. But Jack's behavior became harder to ignore. One afternoon, I reached out to pet him, hoping to show I meant no harm. To my shock, he lunged at me, baring his sharp teeth. My boyfriend, Brian, had to step in and pull me back. "Babe, this isn't normal," Brian said, his voice full of concern. "Dogs don't act like that without a reason." I tried to shrug it off, but deep down, I was shaken. Jack's behavior toward me was starting to freak me out. Why would he act like this when he was perfectly fine with everyone else? The tension finally boiled over during my last visit home. We were having a family dinner, and I was helping Mom in the kitchen, chopping vegetables and chatting about my latest project. From the living room, I heard raised voices. "Cheryl, this has to stop." Dad's voice was louder and angrier than I'd ever heard before. "I don't know what you're talking about." Aunt Cheryl snapped back, her tone defensive but unconvincing. I froze, knife in hand, straining to hear what was going on. Mom shot me a worried glance, but said nothing. Curiosity got the best of me, and I quietly stepped closer to the kitchen door, trying to catch the conversation. "You've been sneaking around, doing God knows what, and now look what's happening." Dad's voice was full of frustration. "What are you accusing me of?" Aunt Cheryl shot back, but there was a sharp edge to her tone, almost like she knew exactly what Dad was talking about. "Jack's behavior isn't normal," Dad continued. "And I know you've been feeding him something to make him act like this. We found the scraps you've been slipping him." My stomach dropped. Feeding Jack something? What could Aunt Cheryl possibly be giving him?
And why?
"Don't be ridiculous," Cheryl huffed, but her voice wavered slightly. "You're blowing this way out of proportion." "Am I?" Dad countered. "Then why does Jack only act this way around Ashley? What's your problem with her?" I felt a cold chill run down my spine. So this wasn't just in my head. Aunt Cheryl had been up to something, and whatever it was, it had turned Jack against me. The room fell silent for a moment, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Then Cheryl spoke again, her voice icy. "Maybe Ashley just isn't good with animals. Some people aren't, you know." I'd had enough. I walked into the living room, my hands trembling, but my head held high. "What's going on here?" I asked, my voice steady despite the chaos I felt inside. Aunt Cheryl looked at me, her expression unreadable. "Oh, nothing, dear. Just a little family discussion." "Really?" I said, crossing my arms. "Because it sounds like you've been doing something to make Jack hate me." "Care to explain?" She didn't answer, but the guilty look in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. That night, the tension lingered like a storm cloud. I didn't get all the answers, but one thing was clear. Aunt Cheryl's strange behavior wasn't just harmless quirkiness. She had gone too far this time, and I wasn't going to let it slide. As I drove back to the city the next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Something told me Aunt Cheryl wasn't done yet, and I needed to be ready for whatever came next. I edged closer, straining to hear every word. Jack's behavior toward Ashley isn't normal, and I think you know why. Mom's voice was firm, but filled with worry. My heart pounded in my chest. What was going on? Why was Jack acting this way toward me? I stood frozen, trying to piece it all together, but my instincts told me something big was about to unravel. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about a misbehaving dog. As I stood there, my thoughts spiraled. This wasn't just family drama. It felt bigger, more sinister. And somehow, I was at the center of it all. After that tense dinner, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't imagining things. Something was off with Jack, and I had to figure out what it was. No way was I going to let Aunt Cheryl manipulate the situation and make me feel like I was crazy. The next day, I came up with a plan. I called Brian, my boyfriend, for backup. "Hey, Brian," I said, trying to sound casual, "do you still have those mini spy cameras? You know, the ones your old paranoid landlord gave you for security." Brian chuckled on the other end. "Yeah, I've still got them."
"Why?
"You planning on going full James Bond or something?" "Something like that," I replied, lowering my voice. "I need to find out what's really going on with Jack." Brian hesitated, but eventually agreed to help. A few days later, we drove to my parents' house when no one was home, carrying the tiny cameras in a backpack. Setting them up around the house was nerve-wracking. My heart raced with every click of the camera as we adjusted their positions. "If we get caught, I'm blaming you," Brian whispered, glancing nervously toward the windows. "Relax," I said, trying to sound confident even though my palms were sweaty. "This is for a good cause." Over the next week, I was constantly on edge, waiting to catch something on the cameras. Every time my phone buzzed with an alert, I felt a mix of fear and anticipation. Then one evening, I finally hit the jackpot. I nearly dropped my phone when I saw the footage. There was Aunt Cheryl, sneaking into my parents' house when no one else was home. She was holding one of my old sweaters, something I had left behind months ago, and using it to train Jack. "Get her, Jack." "Attack," she whispered sharply, waving the sweater like a flag in front of him. Jack lunged at it, growling and tearing into the fabric. Cheryl clapped her hands in approval, praising him every time he got aggressive. My blood ran cold. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My own aunt was training our family dog to hate me, to attack me. Who does something like that? What kind of person goes to such twisted lengths? I felt a wave of anger and disbelief wash over me. My hands trembled as I dialed my brother, James. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Ashley, what's up?" "James," I said, my voice shaking, "you're not going to believe this. I have proof, actual proof, that Aunt Cheryl has been training Jack to attack me." There was a long pause. "Wait, what?" "Ashley, that's a pretty serious accusation. Are you sure about this?" "I've got it all on video," I said, cutting him off. "It's clear as day. She's been sneaking into the house when no one's home and using my clothes to train Jack." James, ever the logical one, quickly switched into lawyer mode. "Okay, don't do anything drastic. Let me come over and see the evidence first. We'll figure this out together." Later that night, James came over to my apartment. I showed him the footage on my phone, replaying the moment Cheryl encouraged Jack to tear apart my sweater. His face went pale. "Jesus Christ, Ashley," he muttered, leaning back in his chair. I don't even know what to say." "It's disgusting. We decided it was time to confront our parents. That night, we sat Mom and Dad down in the living room and played the footage for them. The room was silent except for the sound of Aunt Cheryl's voice echoing from my phone. Mom's face turned white, and she clutched her chest like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "No, this can't be true," she whispered, shaking her head. Dad, on the other hand, looked furious. His jaw tightened, and his hands balled into fists. "What kind of person does this?" he said, his voice low but boiling with anger. "Mom, Dad, I don't know why she's doing this, but it's clear Aunt Cheryl has been trying to turn Jack against me," I said, my voice firm despite the lump in my throat. Mom kept repeating, "This isn't possible. Cheryl wouldn't do something like this," but even she couldn't deny the evidence in front of her. We all knew what had to happen next. Aunt Cheryl needed to be confronted. This wasn't just about a dog anymore. This was about trust, betrayal, and family. And I wasn't going to back down until the truth came out. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Dad sat there stunned, replaying the video over and over as if watching it on loop would somehow make it less real. The room was heavy with silence until Dad finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "We need to confront Cheryl." And so, that's exactly what we did. The next family dinner felt like walking into a battlefield. The tension in the air was so thick it was almost suffocating. Everyone was there: Mom, Dad, James, Lauren, a few cousins, and of course, Aunt Cheryl. I could feel her eyes on me the moment I walked in, but I didn't flinch. "How could you do this, Cheryl?" Mom's voice cracked, and tears welled up in her eyes as she held the phone with the incriminating video. Cheryl, true to form, denied everything. She leaned back in her chair, her face tight with feigned innocence. "This is ridiculous," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "That video is obviously fake. Ashley's always been jealous of me. She probably doctored it herself." Her voice shook slightly, betraying her nerves. Jealous? Of her? The sheer audacity of her claim made me laugh out loud, though it was more out of disbelief than humor. "Me? Jealous of you? That's a good one, Cheryl," I said, crossing my arms. Things escalated quickly. Lauren, my little sister, looked like she was about to cry. She hesitated, then said softly, "Maybe it's just a misunderstanding?" Her voice trailed off as she looked around, searching for someone to agree with her. James wasn't having any of it. He stood up, his face a mix of anger and disgust. "This is no misunderstanding, Lauren. The proof is right there," he said, pointing at the phone. "It's clear as day what's going on." The family was suddenly split down the middle. Mom, Dad, and James were firmly on my side, furious with Cheryl. Lauren and a couple of our cousins, however, seemed to buy into Cheryl's innocent act, nodding along as she spun her web of lies. As for me, I was a wreck. Seeing my family like this, torn apart and at odds with each other, was killing me. The weight of it all started to take a toll. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I was haunted by nightmares. Brian noticed the change in me and tried to help. "Babe," he said gently one evening, "you should talk to someone about this. It's a lot to deal with." But I couldn't, not yet. Not until I was sure Aunt Cheryl wouldn't be able to hurt anyone else in our family. Little did I know, things were about to spiral even further out of control. Cheryl might have thought she'd won this round, but I wasn't about to let her get away with it. No way. I called Brian and James for a strategy session the next day. Sitting in Brian's living room, we brainstormed for hours. "We need to catch her in the act," I said, pacing back and forth. "This time, everyone has to see it for themselves. No more denying, no more excuses. What if we set up a fake family gathering?" Brian suggested, tapping his chin thoughtfully. James nodded. "That could work. We'll make it look like a regular dinner, but we'll bring in someone who can professionally observe Jack's behavior without Cheryl knowing." It was a solid plan, and we wasted no time putting it into action. James reached out to a top-rated animal behaviorist, Dr. Frank, who agreed to help. Meanwhile, I realized we'd need extra surveillance that Cheryl wouldn't suspect. That's when I thought of our tech-savvy cousin, Scott. I gave him a call. "Hey, Scott, how do you like to play spy for a day?" "Hell yeah," he replied, immediately intrigued. "What's the mission?" I filled him in on the details, and he was all in. Within a day, Scott hooked us up with some seriously stealthy surveillance gear, promising it would capture everything without raising any alarms. The day of the gathering arrived, and my nerves were in overdrive. Everyone filed into the house, chatting and laughing as if it were just another family dinner. Aunt Cheryl showed up last, her sharp eyes scanning the room. She greeted everyone with a forced smile, but when her gaze landed on me, it was anything but friendly. "Well, isn't this a lovely surprise?" she said, her tone sweet but her smile not reaching her eyes. Dr. Frank, posing as Brian's coworker, blended into the group seamlessly. He mingled with the family while quietly observing Jack from the sidelines. Everything was set up perfectly. The plan was simple. We had arranged a series of scenarios to trigger Jack's aggression toward me, hoping to catch Cheryl's interference in real time. The first test began when I casually reached for a plate of food near Jack. His reaction was immediate. He growled, his hackles raised, and his gaze fixed on me with hostility. Dr. Frank took notes silently, his expression unreadable. Aunt Cheryl, meanwhile, watched the scene unfold with a flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. But we weren't done yet. The second scenario involved me holding a toy that Jack liked. The moment I picked it up, he lunged at me, barking ferociously. Cheryl's face betrayed her excitement for a brief moment before she caught herself and looked away. By the third test, it was clear something was wrong. Dr. Frank stepped forward, addressing the family in a calm but serious tone. "This isn't normal behavior for a dog. Jack has been conditioned to associate Ashley with aggression. I'm almost certain this was deliberate." Aunt Cheryl's face turned pale. "That's absurd," she snapped, her voice shaking. "You don't know what you're talking about." But the evidence was piling up, and Cheryl knew it. The family was finally starting to see the truth, and I could feel the tide turning in my favor. This battle wasn't over yet, but for the first time, I felt like I had the upper hand. I accidentally bumped into Aunt Cheryl, spilling her drink. "Oh my gosh, I'm so clumsy. Let me help you clean that up," I said quickly. As I bent down to pick up a napkin, Jack started growling fiercely. Dr. Frank raised an eyebrow and scribbled something in his notebook. The tension in the room was growing. A little later, I offered to help Mom in the kitchen. As I passed by Jack, he lunged at me, barking loudly and baring his teeth. "Whoa!" Brian shouted, pulling me back just in time. That was way too close. From across the room, I caught Aunt Cheryl smirking. She didn't even try to hide it. Dr. Frank quietly pulled James aside. "This behavior is extremely unusual," he said. "It's clear the dog has been trained to target your sister specifically. We were building our case, but we needed solid proof, the final piece of the puzzle. It was time for the last act." "I'm heading upstairs to grab something from my old room," I announced, making sure Cheryl could hear. Just as I expected, she quickly made up an excuse to follow me. In my room, I pretended to search through the closet. That's when I heard it. "Jack, attack." I spun around and saw Jack charging at me, teeth bared, while Aunt Cheryl stood there, pointing and yelling commands. My heart stopped for a second. But before Jack could reach me, Brian burst into the room and tackled the dog. "What the hell, Cheryl?" Brian shouted angrily, holding Jack back. Cheryl froze, her face pale as she realized she'd been caught red-handed. "I didn't mean it, she stammered, but her excuses were useless. James appeared in the doorway, holding up his phone. "It's over, Cheryl. We've got everything on video." We all headed downstairs, where the rest of the family was gathered around Scott's laptop. They were watching the live footage in stunned silence. Mom was sobbing, her face buried in her hands. "How could you, Cheryl? She's your niece." Dad looked like he was about to explode with anger. "Get out of my house. Now." Cheryl tried to defend herself, her voice trembling. "It's not what it looks like. Ashley's turned you all against me." But no one believed her anymore. The evidence was clear. Everyone watched in horror as the video revealed months of Aunt Cheryl's cruel actions, training Jack to attack me and manipulating the situation to make me look bad. As Cheryl was escorted out of the house, Dr. Frank walked up to me. "I've documented everything," he said. "If you want to press charges, you have a strong case." I looked around the room. My family was shattered. Jack was cowering in a corner, confused and scared. And Cheryl's figure grew smaller as she walked away. "No," I said finally, my voice firm. "I think karma will handle this one." Little did I know I was right. After Cheryl left, the house was eerily quiet. Everyone was trying to process what had just happened. Dad was the first to speak, breaking the silence. "I can't believe she'd stooped this low. Ashley, honey, I'm so sorry we didn't believe you sooner." I shrugged, still feeling numb. "It's okay, Dad. At least now, everyone knows the truth." Mom was pacing back and forth, wringing her hands. "Should we call the police? This has to be illegal, right?" James, always calm and logical, stepped in. "Let's take a moment to breathe. Ashley, it's your call. Do you want to press charges?" I looked around at my family. Jack was still cowering in the corner, and I let out a deep sigh. "No, I don't think I want to press charges. I just want this nightmare to be over." Just as I said that, we heard a loud noise outside. Curious, we all rushed to the window. There was Aunt Cheryl stomping down the porch steps, muttering angrily under her breath. "You ungrateful brats. After everything I've done for this family." What happened next felt like something straight out of a comedy show. Jack's leash, which had been hanging loosely on the porch railing, somehow got tangled around Aunt Cheryl's feet. She took one angry step forward, and wham! She tumbled down the stairs, flipping head over heels. "Oh my God!" Mom gasped, rushing outside. We all followed, even Jack, who looked confused by all the noise. Aunt Cheryl was sprawled at the bottom of the stairs, wailing in pain. "My arm, my leg. Look what you've done to me," she cried dramatically. Dad knelt beside her, trying to stay calm. "Don't move, Cheryl. We're calling an ambulance." As we waited for the paramedics to arrive, Aunt Cheryl finally broke down. Tears streamed down her face as she sobbed uncontrollably. "I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. Is that what you want to hear?" Her words caught us all by surprise. "I was jealous," she admitted, her voice shaky. "Ashley always had everything. The looks, the brains, everyone's love. I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All of this, everything she did to hurt me, was because she was jealous? It was beyond messed up. Aunt Cheryl, you could have seriously hurt me," I said, staring at her in disbelief. "I know," she whispered, avoiding my eyes as tears streamed down her face. I don't know what I was thinking. When the ambulance finally arrived, they carefully loaded Aunt Cheryl onto the stretcher. Watching her being taken away, I couldn't help but think about the irony of the situation. The very dog she trained to hurt me had ended up causing her downfall. After Aunt Cheryl was whisked away to the hospital, we all gathered in the living room. The house felt heavy with emotion. "What now?" Lauren asked, her voice small and uncertain. Dad let out a long sigh, his shoulders slumping. "Now we heal. As a family." In the weeks that followed, we worked hard to repair the damage. Dr. Frank recommended a great dog trainer to help Jack, and we all pitched in to support his rehabilitation. Slowly but surely, Jack became calmer and happier. "Good boy, Jack," I praised one afternoon as he sat calmly at my feet, wagging his tail. He was like a completely different dog, sweet, gentle, and full of love. It was hard to believe he was the same aggressive pup from just a month ago. As for Aunt Cheryl, karma had done its job. She ended up in a rehabilitation center with a broken arm and leg. No one in the family went to visit her. It felt harsh, but after everything she had done, it also felt fair. A couple of months later, I decided it was time for a fresh start. I planned a big backyard barbecue and invited everyone over. It was a chance to put the past behind us and focus on happier times. As I flipped burgers on the grill, I looked around at my family. Mom and Dad were laughing and chatting with James and his new girlfriend. Lauren was in the yard, playing fetch with Jack, who had turned into the sweetest dog anyone could imagine. Brian walked up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. "How are you feeling, babe?" he asked softly. I smiled, leaning into him. "I feel good," I said honestly. "Better than I have in a long time. And for the first time in months, I truly meant it." I leaned back into Brian and smiled. You know what? I feel good. Really good. And I meant it. Sure, we'd been through a lot, absolute chaos, really, but somehow we made it through. And we came out stronger on the other side. I glanced across the yard and saw Jack happily running around, his tongue hanging out and his tail wagging like crazy. That moment made me realize everything was going to be okay. They say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and in this case, it also made our family closer than ever. So that's the end of my wild story, folks. But now, I've got a question for you. If you were in my shoes, would you have pressed charges against Aunt Cheryl? Or do you think karma gave her the punishment she deserved? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you would do in this crazy situation. And if you enjoyed this roller coaster of family drama, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more unbelievable stories. Until next time.